Maybe the last thing you looked at before closing your eyes wasn't your pillow, it was your bank balance. The glow of the screen in a dark room, one more scroll through the numbers before you let your eyes close, as if checking it one more time could change what it says. There is a moment every night that most people walk through without noticing. It is not the moment you close your eyes. It is the moment right before, when you close the app, put down the phone, and lie there in the dark with whatever you did not solve today. Most people think the day ends when they put the phone down. It doesn't. Something else begins. Your body goes to sleep, but what you carry into sleep keeps working, quietly, without asking your permission, turning over the same numbers, the same fears, long after you've stopped looking at them. Most people believe tomorrow begins when they wake up. It doesn't. Tomorrow begins with whatever they choose to carry or surrender the night before. Florence Scovel Shinn understood this long before most people ever thought about it. Before this video ends, I want to show you why one quiet act of surrender before sleep can change the way you wake up tomorrow. Think about the last time you tried to fall asleep with something unresolved. Maybe it was a payment due in a few days. You checked the app one more time, as if the number might have changed since the last time you looked. You opened the calculator and ran the numbers again. You thought about the conversation you'd have to have tomorrow, the one you'd been avoiding, and rehearsed it in your mind over and over until the words stopped making sense. You told yourself you'd stop thinking about it. And yet, somehow, your mind kept returning to it, like a hand that keeps checking a pocket for something it's afraid to lose. That return is not an accident. What you have not released, you keep reaching for, even in the dark, even when there is nothing left to do about it until morning. This is not a flaw in you. Perhaps the problem was never that your mind refuses to rest. Perhaps it is that your hands are still holding something they were never meant to carry. Imagine someone turning off every light in the house. The kitchen goes quiet. The phone is charging on the bedside table, screen dark now. Nothing in the room is moving anymore, except the weight inside the mind, still turning something over, still holding on. Florence Scovel Shinn built much of her teaching on this very principle. She did not write about money the way an accountant would, in numbers and columns. She wrote about it the way a soul carries weight, as something that either rests in your hands or rests in God's. In The Game of Life and How to Play It, published in 1925, she gave a simple sentence to say whenever something became too heavy to hold. I cast this burden on the Christ within, and I go free. Notice what that sentence does not say. It does not say, I will figure this out. It does not say, I will solve this by morning. It says something far more radical, that the burden can be placed somewhere else entirely, and that the moment it is placed there, you are already free, before the situation itself has changed. She returned to this principle again and again, whenever people came to her carrying burdens they could no longer bear. Most people treat their evening worry as a rehearsal for tomorrow's solution, as if running the numbers one more time in the dark might finally produce the answer. As if turning over the same words one more time might finally make tomorrow's conversation easier. But the mind does not solve at night what the spirit was never meant to carry alone. There is a difference between preparing for tomorrow and refusing to let go of tonight. Perhaps this is why so many people wake up carrying yesterday, not because God refused to help, but because yesterday was never placed in His hands. There is a particular kind of tiredness that has nothing to do with how much you slept. You wake up and the first thing your mind does, before your feet even touch the floor, is return to the same subject it left off with the night before. The bill, the number, the thing that still isn't solved. Somewhere along the way, staying awake with a problem started to feel like taking care of it, as if the worry itself were doing something. As if lying there running through every possible outcome, every version of tomorrow's conversation, every way the month could still go wrong, was a form of responsibility. A kind of vigilance you owed to your own life. But there is a quiet difference between carrying something and controlling it, and most people, without ever choosing to, have confused the two. Responsibility has a shape you can see. It looks like making the one phone call that actually needs to be made. It looks like sending the application, having the conversation with the client, paying what can be paid today instead of what is owed for the whole year. Responsibility does its part and then it stops. It does not follow you into the dark. Control has no shape at all because it never finishes. It looks like imagining 50 different ways a conversation could go and rehearsing all 50 before you fall asleep. It looks like opening the banking app one more time, not to do anything, only to look. It looks like running the same numbers you already ran an hour ago, as if a different total might appear the second time. It looks like trying to see the whole year at once, when only today was ever asked of you. You can feel the difference in the body before you can name it in words. Responsibility, once it has done its part, lets the shoulders drop. The breath slows. There is nothing left to do, so the body believes it. Control keeps the jaw tight even in the dark. It keeps the shoulders drawn up toward the ears long after the lights are off, as if bracing for something that has not even happened yet. You can be lying perfectly still and still be working, still gripping something no one can see. Again and again, Florence Scovel Shinn pointed to this same pattern. In The Power of the Spoken Word, she wrote about those who want to know the way in advance, who want the full plan laid out before they are willing to take a single step of faith. Of them, she said plainly, they do not trust the wisdom and ingenuity of God. That is the difference in the end. Responsibility trusts that its part is enough. Control does not trust, not really, so it keeps reaching for a little more than what was given to it to carry. Think of someone standing at the edge of a garden, refusing to go inside, insisting on holding the hose, the shovel, and the seeds all at once, afraid that if they set any of it down, nothing will grow. Feel the weight of the hose in their hands, the water they haven't turned on yet. Feel the soil, already damp from yesterday, waiting for nothing more than to be left alone. Their hands are tired now, not from planting, but from holding. Every hour they go back and dig up the same spot, just to check, just to see if anything has started. Each time they set the growing back by disturbing it. Each time they walk away more exhausted than before, having done less than if they had simply let the ground do what ground has always known how to do. That is what a mind looks like the night it refuses to release something. Not resting. Not solving, only digging over and over in soil that was already doing exactly what it was supposed to do. You were never asked to carry the whole outcome. You were only ever asked to plant what is yours to plant and trust the rest to a soil you did not have to create. Faith closes its hands around only what is truly its to hold and sleeps. Control keeps you awake because it believes nothing moves unless you are the one moving it. Picture 2 mornings. In one of them, you wake before the alarm even sounds. For a few seconds, there is nothing, no name for what you're feeling, only a kind of stillness in the chest that hasn't been there in weeks. You don't remember deciding to feel this way. You simply do. It takes a moment to recall why. Then it comes back. The night before, you had closed the banking app, closed your eyes, and said, quietly, that you were done carrying it alone. That was all. And somehow, this morning, the weight isn't waiting for you the way it usually is. On another morning, you wake to the same alarm, in the same kind of room, with the same bills waiting in the same folder. But before your feet touch the floor, the heaviness is already there, as if it had been standing at the foot of the bed all night, waiting for you to open your eyes so it could climb back in. You never really ended the day. You only became too tired to keep thinking. The worry didn't leave. It just went quiet enough for sleep to happen anyway, the way a faucet left dripping in another room still runs through the night, even after everyone has stopped listening for it. Same bills. Same balance. Same circumstances, almost to the dollar. 2 entirely different mornings, nothing about the world rearranges itself overnight. You will still get up, make coffee, get dressed, walk into the same kind of morning traffic. The exact same number is still waiting in the exact same account. And yet in one of these mornings, your shoulders drop and your breath comes easy. In the other, you are already bracing, already rehearsing, already tired before the day has asked anything of you. This is not about positive thinking, and it is not about pretending a problem has disappeared because you decided to feel lighter. Florence Scovel Shinn never taught her students to ignore what was in front of them. What she taught was something more specific. The last spiritual act of the day quietly becomes the first atmosphere of the next morning. Everything else in this chapter grows from that one truth. Not the last thought or the last worry successfully avoided for a few hours, but rather the last spiritual act, the last thing you actually did with what you were carrying before you let go of the day. If the last thing you do is hold on tighter, checking, recalculating, rehearsing, then that is the posture your mind carries into the night. And a mind that falls asleep gripping something does not simply release its grip because 8 hours have passed. It wakes up the way it fell asleep, still holding, but if the last thing you do is place it down consciously, deliberately, in a way that actually lets your hands open, something different happens. Not because the circumstances changed overnight, only because you did not carry a locked fist into your rest. In The Magic Path of Intuition, Florence Scovel Shinn wrote a very short sentence that captures this perfectly. In the morning, I'll know just what to do. Notice what that sentence assumes. It assumes that clarity is something you wake up into, not something you have to manufacture the night before through hours of mental rehearsal. It assumes that the answer is already being prepared somewhere you cannot see while you rest. Your part was never to arrive at the answer before you closed your eyes. Your part was only to stop blocking its arrival by refusing to let go. This is why the posture of the night matters so much more than people realize. 2 mornings can rest on the exact same circumstance, the same due date, the same uncertain client, the same thinning account, and still feel like entirely different realities, not because one solved something the other didn't, but because one stopped gripping long enough for something else to begin working while it slept. The morning does not begin when you open your eyes. Tomorrow remembers what tonight surrendered. Somewhere in all of this, a quiet objection tends to rise. If surrender means placing it down and no longer holding it, isn't that the same as giving up? It isn't. But it's worth staying with the question because the two can look almost identical from the outside. Giving up usually begins with a sentence like this one: I cannot do this anymore. It comes from exhaustion. From a place that has run out of ideas, out of energy, out of belief that anything will change. It closes a door and walks away from it, not because peace was found, but because there was nothing left to fight with. Surrender begins somewhere else entirely. It doesn't start with I cannot. It starts with I was never meant to do this alone. One is the sound of a person collapsing. The other is the sound of a person finally putting something down in the right place. Imagine someone lying awake at 2 in the morning. The house is silent, the phone is dark on the nightstand. But the mind hasn't stopped. It almost never does at that hour. What if this doesn't work out? What if the money doesn't come in time? What if tomorrow is worse than today? They may believe they are praying in that moment, but often they are still carrying the burden into the prayer itself, running through possibilities even with their eyes closed. Trying to outthink a fear that doesn't respond to thinking because it was never a problem to be solved with the mind in the first place. Surrender is not the absence of those questions. The questions may still come. The mind doesn't switch off just because you've decided to trust. Surrender is the moment you stop believing you must answer every single one of them before morning. The moment you let the questions exist without chasing each one down the hall in the dark. Florence Scovel Shinn never presented surrender as passivity, and it's worth being clear about that, because passivity is often what people fear it means. To her, surrender was an act of alignment, a willingness to let a wisdom greater than her own move through places her fear could not see into. Not doing nothing, doing the one thing that was actually hers to do, and then stepping out of the way of everything that wasn't. Giving up walks away from the garden entirely and lets it go to weeds. Surrender is the moment you finally trust the soil enough to stop digging it up every hour to check on it. The difference isn't in what you feel in the moment. Both can look from the outside like someone lying still in the dark. The difference is in where the weight goes. Giving up sets the weight down on the floor and leaves it there, unattended, still yours, still waiting for you in the morning. Surrender sets the weight down into hands that were always strong enough to hold it, hands that were simply waiting for you to stop insisting on carrying it yourself. If tonight is the night you're ready to try that, not perfectly, not with total certainty, just honestly, you may leave these words below, exactly as they are. I surrender the burden of my financial worries to God, and I sleep in peace. If that feels like a lot to type, even a shorter version carries the same weight. I surrender my financial worries to God. Not because writing it changes a number in an account, but because naming what you're releasing is often the first honest step toward actually releasing it. Long before anyone explained surrender, someone lived it. Her name was Hannah. Year after year, she carried a grief she couldn't put into words, a longing so heavy that she stopped eating, stopped answering the people around her, and simply wept. There was another woman in her household who never let her forget what she didn't have, who found small ways year after year to remind her of the emptiness, until the reminder became almost as painful as the emptiness itself. Even the man who loved her, watching her push her plate away again, could only ask why she was so sad, why her heart was so troubled, as if loving her enough could have been sufficient to fill what was missing. It wasn't, and he knew it wasn't, and neither of them had an answer for what to do with that. She went to the temple the way people still do when there is nowhere else left to take a heaviness like that. She didn't perform a ritual. She didn't recite something rehearsed. She stood there and poured out what she was carrying, moving her lips without sound, until a priest nearby mistook her silent grief for drunkenness. She wasn't drunk. She was simply too full to speak out loud. When she finally did speak, she told him what was true, that she had been pouring out her soul, not from wine, but from sorrow and trouble too deep to hold in any longer. The priest said something simple to her: "Go in peace. May you receive what you have asked for." And here is the detail almost everyone reading that story rushes past. Nothing had changed yet. No answer had arrived. No circumstance had shifted. She had no evidence, none at all, that anything was different than it had been an hour before. But the text says something remarkable happens next. She went her way and ate, and her face was no longer sad. Let that sink in. Her face. Not her circumstances. Her face changed before her circumstances did. This is what surrender actually does, and it's worth being precise about it because it isn't magic and it isn't wishful thinking. Surrender doesn't promise that the number in the account will be different by morning. What it changes, immediately, without waiting for anything external to move first, is you. The weight leaves the body before it leaves the situation. The face softens before the facts do. Most people wait for the circumstances to change so that they can finally feel at peace. Hannah did it in the other order. She let go first. Peace came first. The visible answer came later, in its own time, in its own way, but by then she was no longer the same woman who had walked into that temple unable to eat or speak. This is the order surrender always moves in, if you let it. Not solve it, then rest. But rest, in the deepest sense, first. And let whatever needs to shift do so on its own timeline, while you are no longer standing guard over it every hour of the night. Think about how much of the night is spent trying to reverse that order. Waiting for the number to change so you can finally exhale. Waiting for the call to come so you can finally sleep well. Waiting for certainty to arrive so that peace is allowed to follow it. Hannah's story quietly refuses that sequence. Peace came first. It came while the actual outcome was still completely unknown, still months away, still only a promise spoken over her in the temple. She didn't wait to feel lighter until she had proof she was allowed to. You don't need the whole story to end tonight. You only need to leave the temple with a different face than the one you walked in with. The way you might close the banking app one more time, not because the balance has changed, but because you no longer need it to change before you can breathe. That is not the same as pretending nothing is wrong. It is the first evidence that surrender has already begun its work, even while the answer is still on its way. You may have already noticed something. If you tried this even once, you surrender it. You feel the relief, real and unmistakable, settle into your chest. You fall asleep lighter than you have in days. And then, the next night, or maybe 2 nights later, there it is again. The same weight, sitting at the edge of the bed, waiting to be picked back up. Your hand finds the phone before you've even decided to reach for it. The app opens almost on its own. The same number greets you, and with it, the same tightening in the chest you thought you had already released for good. If this has happened to you, you may have quietly concluded that it didn't work, that you did something wrong. That real surrender is supposed to be permanent, one decision made once that closes the matter forever. That conclusion, understandable as it is, misunderstands what surrender actually is. Surrender was never a single door you walk through and never have to open again. It is closer to breathing. You don't breathe once in the morning and consider the matter settled for the day. You breathe, and then you breathe again and again, thousands of times, without ever treating the need to breathe a second time as evidence that the first breath failed. No one wakes up at noon gasping and thinks, that morning breath clearly didn't work. The body simply breathes again, as many times as it needs to, for as long as it's alive. Surrender asks the same of you, not perfection, repetition. The same fear can return tomorrow night. That is not proof that tonight's surrender didn't work. It is only proof that you are human, and that old habits of the mind, the ones that spent years learning to hold on tightly, do not unlearn themselves in a single evening. You might surrender it Monday, feel the relief carry you clean through to Wednesday, and then find yourself lying awake Thursday running the same numbers again, wondering if you imagined the peace altogether. You didn't imagine it. It was real on Monday. It can be real again tonight, even after Thursday happened. Maybe Friday arrives, and you receive another email you weren't expecting. Maybe someone tells you they still can't pay you until next week. Maybe the balance is lower than you hoped it would be. In that instant, your mind reaches for the old habit before you even notice it. The checking, the recalculating, the tight grip returning as if it never left. Florence Scovel Shinn understood this too. She never taught surrender as a one-time transaction, something you complete and then move past. Her students returned to the same phrases, the same declarations, night after night, not because the first time had failed, but because the mind needed the repetition the way soil needs more than one rain to hold water. Picture someone who has spent years gripping the same worry every night before sleep, the way a hand can spend years clenched around something so long that the fingers forget how to fully open, even once the object is gone. If you have ever held something tightly for long enough, a steering wheel through a difficult stretch of road, a child's hand through a crowded place, you know that the fingers don't relax the instant the danger passes. They stay curled for a while out of habit, aching faintly, slow to remember they are allowed to open. You cannot expect that hand to release completely on the first attempt. You can only expect it to open a little further each time you consciously choose to loosen it. That is what a nightly practice of surrender actually is, not a single dramatic release that fixes everything at once. A hand slowly, night after night, remembering how to open a little further this week than it could last month, even if some nights it still closes tight out of old habit before you catch yourself and loosen it again. You will likely need to surrender the same worry more than once. Possibly many times. This is not failure repeating itself. It is faith, choosing once again to leave in God's hands what fear keeps asking you to take back. This is the part of the video where you actually do it, not think about doing it, not agree that it sounds like a good idea for some other night when things are calmer. Tonight, if you're willing, right where you are, here is why this works in the simplest terms. Your mind cannot fully rest while your hands are still closed around something. You felt this already in every block before this one. The tight jaw, the returning worry, the calculator opened one more time. What you are about to do is not a trick to make the worry disappear. It is a way of physically, deliberately, consciously placing something down that your mind has been unconsciously holding for far too long. Think of someone who has been standing for hours, holding a heavy bag they forgot they were even carrying, because the weight became so familiar it stopped registering as weight. The moment they finally set it down, there is a strange, almost unsettling lightness in the arms. Not comfort exactly at first, just an unfamiliar absence. That absence is what you are about to feel. Give it permission to feel strange before it feels good. Here is the practice. It takes about 5 minutes. You do not need anything except your own hands and a few honest sentences. If you have your phone nearby, let this be the moment you close whatever app has been holding your attention tonight. The banking app, the messages, the calculator, whatever it is. Not to avoid it, only to signal to your own mind that you are finished checking for tonight. Now let your hands come open. Palms up, resting on your chest or beside you on the bed. This is not symbolic in a small way. Closed hands cannot receive anything new. Your body often learns before your thoughts do. Long before your mind fully trusts surrender, your hands can begin practicing it, and something in you notices the shape, even while the rest of you is still catching up. When you're ready, say, out loud if you can, quietly if you can't, exactly what you are carrying. Not a vague gesture towards stress in general, the actual thing. I am carrying the rent that's due Friday. I am carrying the client who hasn't paid me yet. I am carrying the fear that this month won't be enough. Name it plainly, the way you would tell someone you trust completely because you are. Then place it down. You might use words like these or your own. I surrender this to you tonight. I am not carrying it any further. It is yours now, not because I am done caring, but because I trust you with it more than I trust myself to hold it. Let the sentence land. Don't rush past it to the next thought. And this is the part almost everyone gets wrong the first time. Do not pick it back up. If the mind reaches for it again in the next few minutes, and it likely will, simply notice that it has reached and open your hands again. You may need to do this several times before your body believes you mean it. That is completely normal. It does not mean you are failing. It means you are unlearning a habit that took years to build in a single sitting. You do not need to feel a dramatic wave of peace for this to be working. Some nights it will feel like something shifted immediately. Other nights it will feel like almost nothing happened, and you will fall asleep still faintly aware of the weight, only slightly lighter than before. Both are the practice working. You are not being graded on how transformed you feel. If anxiety rises as you do this, and it may, because releasing control can feel at first like losing control, let it rise without fighting it. You are not trying to force calm, you are simply not picking the worry back up when it invites you to. Anxiety will often try to convince you that a good, careful person would keep thinking about this. Anxiety is not a reliable narrator on this subject. It has never once produced a solution at 2 in the morning. It has only produced exhaustion. One more thing, and this may be the most important part of tonight's practice. Do not lie there afterward waiting for an answer to arrive before you're willing to sleep. That would simply be picking the worry back up in a new disguise. The answer is not required tonight. Peace is what was asked of you tonight. The answer comes on its own schedule, in its own way, and it was never yours to produce on demand. And here is the part worth remembering as your eyes finally close. What you carry into sleep keeps working. You learned earlier in this video that is still true. But tonight, what you are carrying in is not the fear anymore. It is the surrender itself. And surrender, unlike fear, does not need you awake to keep working. It works exactly the way Hannah's blessing worked, quietly, without your supervision, while you rest in a peace that arrived before the answer did. Tonight, you have done the only part that belonged to you. What happens after that no longer asks for your effort. It asks only for your trust. Maybe your life looks nothing like Hannah's. Maybe you don't walk into a temple with a grief too heavy to speak. Maybe you unlock a small shop before the sun is fully up, turning the sign from closed to open with hands still cold from outside. Maybe you sit down at a kitchen table after everyone else in the house has gone quiet, a stack of invoices or a half-finished lesson plan in front of you. Maybe you stand behind a chair in an empty salon at closing time, sweeping up hair from a day that paid for some of what's owed, but not all of it. Maybe your version of that ancient temple is nothing more than the passenger seat of your own car, parked in your own driveway, sitting there for a few extra minutes before you go inside, because you need somewhere to feel what you're feeling before you have to be fine in front of anyone else. The setting is different. The practice is exactly the same. 6 months from now, if you keep placing things down the way you practice tonight, almost nothing about your life may look dramatic from the outside. The same house, most likely. The same work. The same responsibilities waiting for you every morning. The same bills arriving on roughly the same schedule they always have. And yet, the person walking through all of it will not be the same person who began. This is easy to miss because it doesn't happen the way transformation happens in stories. Not a single dramatic morning where everything is suddenly different, but something slower and in its own way more convincing. A month from now, you might notice you didn't spiral the way you used to when an unexpected expense appeared. You handled it, felt the sting of it, and went to bed anyway without turning it over for hours. 2 months from now, you might notice a friend describing exactly the kind of night you used to have, the tight chest, the endless replaying, and realize with some surprise that you haven't had a night like that in weeks. 3 months from now, you might catch yourself in the middle of an ordinary evening doing something as small as making tea or folding laundry and notice that your shoulders are already down without your ever having decided to lower them. None of this happens because the circumstances got easier. Often they don't. Bills still arrive. Some months are still thin. What changes first is never the circumstance. It is you. The version of you that used to need proof before it could rest slowly becomes a version that can rest first and let the proof follow in its own time. The hands that used to close instinctively around every worry the moment it appeared slowly become hands that open a little faster each time with a little less resistance, the way any practiced motion becomes easier the more it is repeated. A grip that took years to form does not release in a week, but it also does not stay exactly as tight forever, not if you keep loosening it on purpose night after night, even when nothing seems to be happening. Sometimes the people around you notice the change before you do. Someone might mention, almost in passing, that you seem lighter lately, that you don't carry a room the way you used to, without either of you being able to say exactly why. You may not have an answer for them beyond the quiet truth of it, that somewhere along the way you started putting things down at night instead of carrying them straight through until morning. This is not a technique you master once and then move past. It stays a practice for as long as you're a person who has things to carry, which is to say, for the rest of your life. But somewhere along the way, without a single dramatic turning point you could point back to, you may notice that you no longer feel quite as far from peace as you used to. Not because peace finally arrived from somewhere outside you, because you finally stopped keeping it at arm's length. Transformation, real transformation, is almost never loud. It doesn't arrive as a single dramatic decision you make once and never have to make again. It arrives the way everything in this video has already shown you, quietly, night after night, in a room no one else is watching. A grip loosening a little more than it did the week before. A breath coming a little easier than it used to. A person slowly becoming someone who no longer needs the whole answer before they're willing to rest. This is not a technique for solving your finances by tomorrow morning. It was never meant to be that. What it offers instead is something slower and, in its own way, sturdier, a way of ending each day that doesn't leave you carrying today's weight into a day that hasn't even started yet. Night by night, that single choice, to place something down instead of gripping it until sleep finally forces your hands open anyway, quietly reshapes the kind of life you're living, long before it reshapes the number in any account. Somewhere in all of this, honesty matters more than certainty ever did. Not the honesty of having it all figured out, but the honesty of admitting plainly what you're still carrying tonight and choosing once again to place it somewhere steadier than your own two hands. A whole life is not built from one perfect night of surrender. It is built the way most real things are built, slowly, imperfectly, one honest evening at a time, repeated for as long as it takes. Imagine for a moment that tonight ends differently than most of your nights have. The room is exactly the same. The same ceiling above you, the same quiet settling over the house, the same phone resting dark now on the nightstand, the same account waiting for you in the morning with the same balance it had an hour ago. Nothing outside this room has changed, and yet something inside the room is different. For the first time in a long while, there is nothing left for you to solve tonight, not because every answer has arrived, because you finally stopped asking this night to carry a tomorrow that hasn't even begun yet. The room grows quiet. Your breathing slows, your hands remain open, resting where you place them. Somewhere outside, the world keeps doing whatever the world does at this hour. Traffic thinning, a neighbor's porch light clicking off. The ordinary machinery of a night that doesn't need your supervision to keep turning. Tomorrow will ask something of you. It always does. But tonight only ever asked one thing. Rest. If you find that this kind of reflection helps you return to peace a little more easily, you're welcome to stay here. This channel exists for exactly this. For the nights you need somewhere to come back to, and for every ordinary night in between, when nothing in particular is wrong, but the mind still hasn't learned to rest on its own yet. There is no shame in needing to hear the same truth more than once. Most truths worth living by take repeating before they finally settle. And if tonight's practice was real for you, if your hands actually opened, even for a moment, you might leave a simple reminder for yourself below, something you could read again tomorrow if the grip starts to return. I trust God, He already knows the way. Not because God needs to hear it, but because putting words to an act of faith is one more way of letting the heart believe what the hands have already done. Some truths become a little stronger the moment we choose to say them out loud. Before you close your eyes, there is one last small thing. Somewhere on this channel, there is a cloth. You may have heard of it before if you've been here on other nights. It rests over something valuable that was never actually lost, only covered, waiting for someone patient enough to lift it and look underneath. Perhaps the cloth never covered God's provision at all. Perhaps it only covered your sight while your hands were too full to lift it. Some things are not restored because they return. Some are restored because, at last, you are able to see what never truly left. Surrender is one more way that cloth gets lifted a little further each time, not because your hands did the uncovering, because your hands finally stopped holding it shut. Every night from now on, there will be a small doorway waiting for you. It lasts only a few minutes, the space between the last thing you look at and the first dream you enter. Most people walk through that doorway still carrying tomorrow on their backs, still gripping numbers and outcomes they were never meant to carry through the night. You no longer have to walk through it that way. Not every night and not perfectly. But you now know the doorway is there, and you know what it feels like to walk through it with open hands instead. Tomorrow night, you may still feel your hand reaching toward the phone before you've even thought about it. Old habits rarely announce that they're returning. They simply appear quietly, as if nothing has changed. If that happens, don't treat it as proof that tonight meant nothing. Perhaps it is only another invitation to open your hands again, the way you did tonight, for as many nights as it takes. Think back for a moment to how this video began. A phone glowing in a dark room, a number checked one more time as if checking it again could change what it said. That was where tonight started. It doesn't have to be where tonight ends. After this video ends, nothing asks you to remember every sentence you've heard. You only need to remember one small movement: open hands. That's enough. Tomorrow morning, you may not even recall a single word from tonight, and that will be all right. Your hands will remember what they practiced long after the rest of it fades, so let this be how tonight actually ends, not with an answer, not with a plan for tomorrow. With your hands still open, exactly where you placed them, and nothing left between you and the rest that was always waiting on the other side of surrender. Elsewhere on this channel, there is another conversation about what happens when you finally stop trying to control what was never yours to control in the first place. If tonight's cloth felt a little heavier than usual, that conversation may be worth finding next, on another night like this one when you have a few more minutes to spend somewhere quiet. Until then, may your hands stay open. May what you placed in God's hands tonight remain there, and may you discover, little by little, that the peace you were searching for was never waiting at the end of tomorrow. It was waiting at the moment you finally stopped carrying tomorrow alone.